You're suspended until you apologize to my wife." The moment those words left my son's mouth, the entire conference room fell silent. Every eye turned toward me. Some people looked shocked. Others avoided looking at me altogether. A few exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. I could feel my face burning, but not from embarrassment alone. It was disbelief. The man standing in front of me wasn't just my business partner. He was my son, the little boy I once carried into construction sites because I couldn't afford a babysitter. The child whose future I had sacrificed everything to build. Now he was publicly humiliating me in the company his father and I created from nothing. Beside him stood his wife, Natalie. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The small smile on her face told me everything. She thought she had already won. For one brief second, I considered fighting back. I could have reminded everyone in that room who owned most of the company. I could have exposed every decision they had made behind my back. Instead, I simply picked up my purse. "Fine," I said quietly. No anger, no tears, no argument, just one word. I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard whispers begin to spread across the room. Somebody laughed softly. That hurt far more than Daniel's words, because I recognized the sound. It was the sound of people believing my time was over. None of them knew they had just witnessed the beginning of something very different. As the elevator doors closed, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My reflection stared back at me in the polished steel. Gray hair, tired eyes, a woman of 65 who suddenly looked much older than she had that morning. For a moment, I barely recognized myself. Then another face appeared in my memory. David, my husband, the man who believed in me long before anyone else did. 32 years earlier, we had started Solis Architecture inside a tiny apartment with one folding table, one borrowed telephone, and more determination than money. David designed buildings. I built the business. He dreamed with blueprints. I dreamed with contracts. Together, we turned impossible ideas into real buildings across the state. There were years when we worked 18 hours a day. Vacations disappeared. Weekends became client meetings. Birthdays were celebrated at construction sites. When Daniel was born, I carried him into meetings because missing opportunities wasn't an option. Our clients used to joke that our youngest employee couldn't even walk yet. They weren't wrong. That company grew alongside my son. Every hallway held a memory. Every office reminded me of another sacrifice. Every brick represented another promise David and I had made to each other. Then 5 years ago, everything changed. David died from a sudden heart attack while reviewing blueprints in his office. One ordinary afternoon, he was discussing a new hotel project. An hour later, he was gone. I remember standing beside his hospital bed, unable to understand how someone who had spent his life creating could disappear so quickly. I wanted to fall apart. Instead, 40 employees were waiting for answers. Projects had deadlines. Families depended on our company. So I wiped away my tears and went back to work. Every contract, every client meeting, every design approval. I handled everything myself. People expected the company to struggle after losing its founder. Instead, we became stronger. I thought David would have been proud. Eventually, Daniel joined the business full-time. Watching him walk through those same doors his father once opened filled me with hope. He was smart, hardworking, respectful. For months, working together felt natural. We shared lunch almost every day. We talked about expanding into new cities. Sometimes we'd laugh remembering stories about David. I honestly believed our family's future was secure. Then Daniel attended a business conference in Atlanta. That's where he met Natalie. She introduced herself as a corporate image consultant. Confident, elegant, always saying exactly what people wanted to hear. Daniel was fascinated almost immediately. Within 2 months, they were engaged. Only 4 months later, they were married. I truly wanted to welcome her into our family. I invited them to dinner, cooked Daniel's favorite meal, decorated the house with fresh flowers. Before dessert, I gave Natalie my mother's pearl necklace. She smiled politely before saying, "Thank you, Eleanor. It's very vintage." Something about the way she emphasized that word made my stomach tighten. Later that night, while carrying coffee into the kitchen, I overheard her whispering to Daniel, "Your mother's house feels outdated." Daniel laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was enough. Standing there in silence, I realized something had quietly shifted. I convinced myself it was nothing. A difference in taste. A young couple adjusting to family life. I wanted to believe love would overcome pride. I had no idea. That small moment was only the first crack in everything my husband and I had spent 32 years building. Natalie didn't try to take control overnight. Looking back, I think that was part of her plan. If she had come in demanding authority from the beginning, I would have stopped her. Instead, she wrapped every change in words like progress and modernization, making it sound as though she was helping the company instead of slowly changing it. She started visiting the office almost every day. At first, she only made suggestions. She would walk through the lobby, studying every corner before saying, "This place has good bones, but it feels outdated." I smiled politely. "Our clients seem to like it." She smiled back. "They like you. Imagine how much more they'd love the company if it looked current." A week later, I walked into the office and froze. The paintings David had personally chosen were gone. The reception furniture had been replaced. Even the company logo hanging behind the front desk had changed without anyone asking me. I found Daniel in his office. "What happened to the lobby?" I asked. He barely looked up from his computer. "Natalie thought it needed a fresher image." "You changed everything without asking me?" "It's just decoration, Mom. Just decoration." Those paintings weren't decoration. David bought each one after completing a major project. Every frame represented years of sacrifice. But to Daniel, they had become old furniture that could simply disappear. From that day forward, the office no longer felt like mine. Board meetings changed too. Whenever I presented a proposal, Natalie would wait patiently until I finished before offering her opinion. "I think Eleanor's approach is a little traditional." Traditional. That became her favorite word. It sounded respectful, but everyone understood what she really meant. Old. Outdated. No longer necessary. One Friday, I presented plans for renovating a historic hotel downtown. I had spent weeks balancing the client's budget with preservation requirements. It was exactly what they had requested. Leo, our accountant, nodded. "The numbers work perfectly." Before anyone else spoke, Natalie leaned forward. "I honestly don't see the vision. This feels safe. The client wants something exciting." I turned toward Daniel. "What do you think?" He hesitated only a second. "I think Natalie has a point." Those 6 words hurt more than I expected. Not because he disagreed with me, because he never even considered defending me. The room became painfully quiet. Several longtime employees avoided looking in my direction. No one wanted to be caught taking sides. After the meeting, Sophia quietly knocked on my office door. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Solis." Natalie asked me to start reporting directly to her. I stared at her. She said Daniel approved it. Sophia lowered her eyes. "I didn't want to tell you like this." I reached across my desk and squeezed her hand. "It's all right. Just do your job." She nodded, but tears filled her eyes before she left. Watching loyal employees become afraid broke my heart more than any insult Natalie could throw at me. Over the following weeks, I noticed even more changes. 3 new employees appeared without my approval. Longtime suppliers suddenly stopped calling me. Expense reports no longer arrived on my desk. Whenever I questioned Daniel, he acted frustrated. "Mom, we're trying to make the company more efficient." Efficient doesn't mean ignoring me. It means trusting us. Trust us. Those words echoed in my head all afternoon. I had trusted Daniel his entire life. Now that trust was slowly being used against me. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Martinez, a client who had worked with us for over 15 years. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something." "Of course." "Who exactly is Natalie?" My stomach tightened. "Why?" "She called me this morning and said she's overseeing creative decisions now. She also suggested making major changes to my project. I told her I only approved designs through you." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "I appreciate you telling me," I finally said. After hanging up, I sat perfectly still. This wasn't about office furniture anymore. My own clients were beginning to wonder who was actually running the company. That afternoon, I walked straight into Daniel's office. Natalie was sitting beside him reviewing contracts. "We need to talk," I said calmly. Daniel sighed. "Mom, we're busy." "No. You're making time." I looked directly at Natalie. "You contacted one of my clients without my approval." She folded her arms. I'm helping the company grow. No, you're creating confusion. Daniel stood beside her. Mom, maybe it's time you started letting go a little. Those words hit harder than anything Natalie had ever said. Letting go. My own son believed I had become an obstacle. I walked out without another word. Back in my office, I closed the door and looked around the room David and I had built together. For the first time, I didn't feel respected there. I felt replaced. As I sat at my desk, I noticed a stack of approval forms waiting for signatures. Something felt wrong. Several documents had already been processed, without my authorization. A cold feeling settled in my chest. This wasn't simply disrespect anymore. Something much bigger was happening behind my back. And I was finally ready to find out exactly what it was. I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. The stack of documents on my desk told a story no one wanted me to read. At first glance, everything looked ordinary: supplier agreements, hiring forms, expense approvals. But the deeper I looked, the more obvious it became that something was terribly wrong. My signature was missing. Instead, Daniel had approved decisions I had never even seen. I pulled out another file. Then another. New vendors had replaced companies we'd trusted for over 15 years. Payment limits had been changed. Internal policies had quietly been rewritten, all without my knowledge. I sat back in my chair, staring at the papers. This wasn't carelessness. Someone was slowly removing me from my own company. The next morning, I asked Leo, our accountant, to come into my office before anyone else arrived. The moment I placed the documents in front of him, his expression changed. You already knew, I said quietly. He lowered his eyes. I suspected. How long? A few weeks. Why didn't you tell me? He took a deep breath. I brought up several concerns to Daniel. He told me everything had your approval. It didn't. I know that now. Leo opened his laptop and showed me records I had never seen. 3 recently hired employees shared Natalie's last name or family connections. Their salaries were unusually high, yet none of them had experience in architecture. Then he showed me another report: consulting payments. Thousands of dollars sent to a small company Natalie claimed provided branding services. The invoices were vague. The work couldn't be verified. I felt my stomach tighten. This doesn't look right. Leo nodded slowly. I've been documenting everything just in case. For the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't imagining any of this. Someone else had noticed too. Later that morning, I walked into Daniel's office carrying the files. Natalie was already sitting beside him. We need to talk. Daniel looked irritated. What now, Mom? I laid the papers across his desk. Who approved these hires? I did. Without consulting me. We're trying to move faster. And these supplier changes? They offered better prices. What about these consulting payments? Natalie answered before Daniel could speak. I've been helping improve the company's image. At the company's expense. She folded her arms. Everything I've done has been for the future of this business. I looked directly at Daniel. Is that what you believe? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Those words hurt more than I expected. Not because he disagreed with me. Because he no longer sounded like my son. He sounded like someone repeating another person's opinions. I left without saying another word. Driving home that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. Every warning sign I had ignored suddenly fit together. Natalie wasn't simply influencing Daniel. Together, they were building a company that no longer had room for me. When I reached home, I walked straight into my study. The room hadn't changed since David passed away. His books still lined the shelves. His old fountain pen still rested on the desk. Behind the bookshelf sat the small safe where we kept every important legal document. I unlocked it and carefully removed a thick folder. David had organized everything years earlier. At the time, I teased him for being overly cautious. He simply smiled. Family businesses only survive when the paperwork is stronger than emotions. I finally understood what he meant. For nearly 2 hours, I read every page. Corporate bylaws, shareholder agreements, the family trust. Then I found something that made me stop breathing. According to David's trust, I permanently owned 75% of Solis Architecture. Daniel owned only 25%. I kept reading. Another clause caught my attention. Any partner acting against the interests of the company could immediately lose executive authority through a majority vote. Majority. I was the majority. All this time I had believed Daniel and I shared equal control. We didn't. David had protected the company before he ever passed away. He had protected me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at a signature on the final page. For weeks I had felt powerless. Now I realized I had never actually lost my authority. I had simply forgotten it existed. A calm settled over me. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. I reached for my phone and called Marcus, the family lawyer who had worked beside David and me for decades. He answered after the second ring. Eleanor, everything okay? I looked once more at the trust documents spread across my desk. No, I replied calmly. But it will be. What happened? I finally remembered who owns this company. There was silence on the other end. Then Marcus asked quietly, What do you need? I need every corporate document you have. When? Tomorrow morning. As I ended the call, I carefully closed the trust folder. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking like a wounded mother. I was thinking like the woman who had built an empire. And tomorrow, the fight to take it back would finally begin. Marcus arrived at my house the next morning carrying 2 heavy boxes filled with legal files. We sat in David's old study, the same room where my husband had spent years planning the future of our company. Seeing those documents spread across his desk felt strangely comforting. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was searching for facts. Marcus adjusted his glasses and opened the trust agreement. Eleanor, legally, you still control this company. Daniel only has the authority you allowed him to have. So I can take it back? He nodded. Yes. But first we need proof that authority was abused. That became our mission. No arguments. No dramatic confrontations. Only evidence. Leo arrived later that morning carrying his laptop. The moment he walked into the room, I could see the relief on his face. He had been waiting for someone to ask questions. I've kept copies of everything, he said. He opened file after file. New suppliers had replaced companies we'd trusted for years, yet they charged higher prices. 3 recently hired employees all had personal connections to Natalie. Consulting invoices totaling more than $50,000 had been approved without board authorization. Marcus examined each payment carefully. Who owns this consulting company? Leo typed a few keys before turning the screen toward us. The owner was Natalie. For several seconds, nobody spoke. So the company has been paying her directly? I finally asked. Leo nodded. There are no detailed reports showing what services were actually provided. Marcus closed the file slowly. This could be considered financial fraud. Hearing those words out loud made everything feel real. I had spent months believing Natalie was simply trying to influence Daniel. Now I realized money had become part of the plan. That afternoon, Sophia came to my house after work. She looked nervous. I need to tell you something. I invited her inside. She reached into her purse and handed me several printed emails. I couldn't keep these at the office. Marcus immediately began reading them. His expression grew darker with every page. He handed one to me. The first email came from Natalie. We only need to wait until Eleanor is ready to retire. Once she's out, the company will finally be ours. I swallowed hard. Then I read Daniel's reply. My mom deserves to rest. We just have to handle it carefully. I read those words again. And again. Not once had he defended me. Not once had he questioned what Natalie wanted. Instead, he had helped her plan my removal. Sophia quietly wiped away tears. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Solis. I gently squeezed her hand. This isn't your fault. Marcus continued organizing the evidence. He separated everything into folders. Unauthorized hiring, questionable payments, supplier changes, policy violations, client interference. Then he looked directly at me. Eleanor, this is much bigger than a family disagreement. I know. If you move forward, Daniel could lose every executive privilege he has. I looked toward the window where the afternoon sunlight stretched across David's garden. For a brief moment, I wished my husband were sitting beside me. He always knew what to do. Then I remembered something he used to say whenever a difficult client tried to take advantage of us. Never confuse kindness with weakness. I smiled sadly. Somewhere along the way, Daniel and Natalie had mistaken my patience for surrender. They believed silence meant I had accepted defeat. They couldn't have been more wrong. Marcus closed the final folder. We have enough evidence to begin preparing legal action. No, I replied calmly. Not yet. He looked surprised. They think they've already won. He nodded slowly. And people who believe they've already won usually become careless. Exactly. Over the next several days, I behaved as though nothing had changed. I attended meetings, answered emails, smiled when necessary. Meanwhile, Marcus quietly prepared legal documents. Leo continued collecting financial records. Sophia documented every questionable instruction Natalie gave her. Without realizing it, Daniel and Natalie kept giving us more evidence. Every decision they made only strengthened my position. By the end of the week, Marcus returned with a thick folder. It's ready. Inside were documents revoking every authority I had delegated to Daniel. Audit requests, corporate notices, emergency shareholder actions. Everything had been carefully prepared. All that remained was choosing the right moment. I placed my hand on the folder and took a slow breath. For months I had waited for my son to remember who I was. Now I understood something painful. He wasn't going to remember. I would have to remind him. And when that day arrived, neither Daniel nor Natalie would see it coming. For the next several days, I did exactly what Marcus advised. I acted as though nothing had changed. I attended meetings, answered emails, approved the work that still reached my desk, and smiled whenever Daniel or Natalie looked my way. They mistook my silence for surrender, and that made them careless. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Natalie announced she had arranged a presentation for a wealthy developer named Mr. Vargas. It was a project worth nearly $20 million, one that could shape the company's future. Oddly enough, no one had invited me. Sophia quietly stopped by my office that morning. Mrs. Solis, the meeting starts in 10 minutes. I wasn't asked to attend. She lowered her voice. I thought you should know anyway. I thanked her and walked toward the conference room. When I stepped inside, Natalie smiled with obvious surprise. Oh, Eleanor, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. I ignored the comment and took a seat near the back. She immediately began presenting her vision. The room admired the glossy renderings displayed on the large screen. Mr. Vargas seemed impressed. Then I looked closer. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that building, not because it resembled another design, because I had personally worked with the international firm that created it years earlier. Natalie hadn't created anything. She had copied it, almost line for line. I remained quiet until she finished. Mr. Vargas smiled. This is exactly the bold direction I'm looking for. I slowly raised my hand. Natalie hesitated before speaking. Yes, Eleanor. I'm afraid there's a serious problem. The room fell silent. I stood and walked toward the screen. This design is nearly identical to the Al Zahra Tower in Dubai. The structural layout, facade pattern, and roofline are all protected intellectual property. Natalie's smile disappeared. That's not true. I calmly pointed to several details. The entrance geometry is identical. So are the support columns and curtain wall system. Anyone familiar with the original project would recognize it immediately. Mr. Vargas looked from the screen to Natalie. Is she correct? Natalie stumbled over her words. We were inspired by international architecture. Inspiration is one thing, I replied. Copying another architect's work is something entirely different. The developer's expression changed instantly. I don't invest millions in lawsuits. Without another word, he gathered his papers and walked out. The conference room remained frozen. $20 million had just walked out the door. The moment the door closed, Natalie spun toward me. How dare you embarrass me like that? I met her eyes without raising my voice. I protected this company. You ruined my presentation. No, you ruined it the moment you chose plagiarism over originality. Daniel finally stood. Mom, couldn't you have waited until after the meeting? I stared at him in disbelief. After we signed a contract based on stolen work? He rubbed his forehead but said nothing else. Natalie stepped closer. You know what your real problem is? I stayed silent. You can't accept that your time is over. Her voice grew louder. This company has outgrown you. You're old-fashioned, stubborn, and completely disconnected from today's business world. Every employee in the room listened without speaking. Then she smiled cruelly. The only reason people respected you was because of your husband. Without David, you're just an old woman trying to stay relevant. Those words hit harder than anything she had ever said. She hadn't insulted only me. She had insulted the man who spent his entire life building this company beside me. I slowly turned toward Daniel. Surely he would defend his father. Instead, he looked down at the floor. Natalie, maybe that was a little harsh. A little harsh. That was all he could say. Something inside me became perfectly still. Months of disappointment, weeks of investigation, years of believing my son would eventually remember who he was. All of it ended in that single moment. I picked up my purse. Natalie called after me. I'm not finished talking. I looked back one last time. No, I said calmly. You already have. I walked out of the conference room without another word. Sophia looked at me with tears in her eyes as I passed. I simply smiled, not because I was happy, because my decision had finally been made. That evening I returned home, walked into David's study, and opened the folder Marcus had prepared. Every legal document was waiting. Every signature line was marked. Every piece of evidence had been organized. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. It's time. He answered immediately. I'll have everything ready. As I ended the call, I looked at David's photograph sitting on the desk. I waited as long as I could, I whispered. But tomorrow. I closed the folder and smiled for the first time in months. They're going to learn exactly who they tried to replace. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anxious. I felt ready. I dressed carefully in the pearl gray suit I used to wear during our biggest negotiations. Before leaving, I put on the diamond earrings David had given me years ago. Looking into the mirror, I didn't see the woman Daniel and Natalie believed they had defeated. I saw the woman who had built Solis architecture from nothing. When I arrived at the office, the parking lot was almost empty. Sophia was already waiting outside with a folder in her hands. Leo arrived moments later carrying his laptop, followed by Marcus and 3 professional security officers. Marcus gave me a reassuring nod. Everything is prepared. We entered the building before anyone else. Inside my office, Marcus placed several documents across my desk. This revokes every executive authority you temporarily delegated to Daniel. He slid another paper toward me. This orders an immediate internal audit, then another. This restores complete financial control to you. I read each page carefully before signing. There was no anger in my hand, only certainty. One signature after another, I quietly reclaimed the authority I had unknowingly surrendered months earlier. Leo immediately opened his laptop. I've disabled Daniel's access to the company accounts, he said. His financial approvals no longer work. And Natalie, her access to every internal system has been removed. Sophia handed me another folder. I printed every client email she redirected without your permission. I smiled gratefully. Thank you. Over the last few weeks, the people who truly cared about the company had quietly stood beside me. Now it was time to protect them too. Before 7:30, I walked into David's old office. 4 years, I had left it untouched after his passing. His desk, books, and framed photographs remained exactly where he had left them. I carried in a small box containing my own belongings. David's photograph, our first company award, the original brass nameplate that read Founders. I carefully placed everything on the desk. This wasn't simply moving offices. I was reclaiming my rightful place. At exactly 7:45, Daniel's car pulled into the parking lot. From the window, I watched him step out holding a coffee, completely unaware that his world had already changed. Natalie arrived a few minutes later wearing a bright red dress, laughing as they walked inside together. Neither of them noticed the security officers standing quietly near the entrance. Neither noticed the worried expressions on several employees' faces. 5 minutes later, I heard Daniel shouting from his office. What happened? His office door swung open. Mom! I stepped calmly into the hallway. He stormed toward me holding his laptop. My password doesn't work. I know. What did you do? I restored company security. He stared at me. What does that mean? It means your executive access has been revoked. For a second, he simply blinked. Then he laughed. You can't be serious. Marcus stepped forward carrying a legal folder. According to the shareholder agreement, Mrs. Solis has legally withdrawn all delegated authority effective immediately. Daniel's smile disappeared. I'm still a partner. You remain a minority shareholder. Marcus replied calmly. But you no longer possess executive authority. Natalie quickly stepped forward. This is ridiculous. She's acting emotionally because she can't accept change. I looked directly at her. No, Natalie. I'm acting because I've reviewed the evidence. She crossed her arms. What evidence? The unauthorized payments. The fake consulting invoices. The unapproved hiring. The policy violations. Her confidence faded. Daniel looked from Marcus to me. Mom, what is this? This, I answered quietly, is accountability. Several employees had gathered nearby, pretending to work while listening to every word. The office had become completely silent. Marcus handed Daniel an official notice. You are suspended from all executive duties pending investigation. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he read the document. Natalie reached for it. One of the security officers calmly stepped between them. Ma'am, please don't interfere. She glared at him. Do you even know who I am? Before he could answer, I spoke. You're someone who has no official position in this company. Her face flushed with anger. You can't remove me. I don't have to. You were never an employee. For the first time since entering the building, she had no response. Daniel looked completely lost. His confidence had disappeared. He looked at me, almost like the frightened little boy he used to be. Mom, we can talk about this privately. I slowly shook my head. We've had months to talk. He lowered his eyes. I'm asking for one chance. I took a slow breath. In 30 minutes, every employee will attend an emergency meeting. His head snapped up. You wouldn't. I already have. Sophia stepped forward, holding printed meeting notices. They've all been informed. Daniel looked around the office. Every familiar face suddenly seemed distant. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. He turned back toward me. What are you going to tell everyone? I met his eyes without raising my voice. The truth. The hallway fell completely silent, and I could see something I hadn't seen in Daniel's face for a very long time. Fear. At 8:30, the conference room was full. Every employee sat in tense silence, looking from me to Daniel, then to Natalie, then to the security officers standing quietly near the door. No one understood exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel that something serious had changed. I stood at the front of the room with Marcus beside me. Daniel sat near the end of the table, pale and restless. Natalie sat beside him with her arms crossed, still trying to look offended instead of afraid. I took a slow breath. This company was built on trust, honesty, and respect. I began. Over the past several months, those values have been violated. The room became completely still. Marcus connected his laptop to the screen. The first slide showed unauthorized payments to Natalie's consulting company. More than $53,000 was transferred without proper approval, Marcus explained. The company receiving these payments is registered under Natalie's name. Whispers spread across the room. Natalie stood immediately. Those were legitimate consulting fees. Marcus didn't raise his voice. There are no valid contracts, no approved invoices, and no documented services matching these payments. Her face reddened. Daniel stared at the screen without moving. The next slide showed hiring records. 3 employees were hired without approval, Marcus continued. All had personal connections to Natalie, and all received salaries above normal range. One of the younger employees looked down at the table, embarrassed. I spoke gently. No one who accepted a job in good faith will be blamed. The responsibility belongs to the people who abuse their authority. Several employees nodded quietly. Then Leo stood. I need to say something. I looked at him. Go ahead. He faced the room. I documented these concerns because the numbers didn't make sense. When I questioned them, I was told Mrs. Solis had approved everything. That was not true. The silence grew heavier. Marcus changed the slide again. This time, emails appeared. Natalie's words filled the screen. Once Eleanor retires, the company will finally be ours. Then Daniel's response. My mom deserves to rest. We just have to handle it carefully. A sharp breath moved through the room. I did not look at Daniel. If I had, I might have broken. Instead, I kept my eyes on the employees who had trusted me for years. This was not a misunderstanding, I said. It was a plan. Natalie slammed her hand against the table. This is character assassination. Eleanor is doing this because she's bitter and afraid of change. I looked at her calmly. Change does not require lying to clients. Change does not require stealing money. Change does not require humiliating the woman who built the company you're trying to claim. For once, she had no immediate answer. Sophia slowly stood from her seat. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. Natalie asked me to redirect client messages away from Mrs. Solis. She told me to say Mrs. Solis was unavailable even when she was in the building. Another employee raised his hand. She told our team not to bring design concerns to Eleanor anymore. Then Manuel, one of our senior architects, stood. Many of us knew something was wrong, he said, but we were afraid speaking up would cost us our jobs. Those words cut deeply. I had been so focused on surviving the humiliation that I hadn't fully seen how much my silence had affected everyone else. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry any of you felt unprotected in this company. That ends today. Marcus opened the final folder. Effective immediately, Daniel Solis is removed from all executive duties pending investigation. He remains a minority shareholder only. His signing authority, system access, financial permissions, and decision-making power are revoked. Daniel finally looked up. Mom! His voice cracked. I made mistakes, but I'm your son. I felt my heart twist. You are my son, I said quietly. But this company is not a toy I can hand back because you regret being caught. Tears filled his eyes. I never meant for it to go this far. You let it go this far every day you stayed silent. Natalie stood, so fast her chair scraped the floor. You can't do this to him. I turned to her. I already have. Javier stepped forward. Mrs. Solis, you need to leave the premises. Natalie laughed bitterly. You think this is over? I'll sue every one of you. Marcus closed his folder. You may try, but I would advise your attorney to review the evidence first. Her expression changed just enough to show fear. Javier and another security officer escorted her toward the door. She turned back once, her eyes full of hatred. You ruined your own son. I looked at Daniel, then back at her. No, you helped him ruin himself. The door closed behind her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Manuel began clapping. Slowly, others joined. Within seconds, the entire room was standing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Sophia hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for fighting." Daniel remained seated, staring at his hands like a man waking up inside the wreckage of his own choices. I walked to him slowly. "If you ever want my trust again," I said, "you will have to earn it from the ground up." He nodded without looking at me. When he finally left the room, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. And as I watched my son walk away from the company his father built for him, I realized justice had come, but healing would be much harder. The days after that meeting were quiet, but not peaceful. Quiet can be strange after a storm. The shouting stops. The doors stop slamming. People return to their desks. Phones ring again. Emails continue arriving. But underneath everything, there is still wreckage to clean up. Marcus began legal action against Natalie immediately. Her lawyer called us the next morning, loud and confident, threatening lawsuits, public statements, and reputation damage. Marcus listened calmly, then sent him the evidence folder. By the end of that day, his tone had changed. 2 days later, Natalie agreed to settle. She returned the $53,000, signed a non-compete agreement, and agreed never to represent, contact, or interfere with Solis architecture again. In exchange, I chose not to pursue criminal charges. Some people later asked why I let her walk away. The truth was simple. I did not want revenge to become my new prison. I wanted my company back. I wanted my life back. And I wanted Natalie gone. Daniel disappeared from the office after that. At first, I expected him to come by. I thought maybe he would stand in my doorway with red eyes and finally give me the apology I had needed for months. But he didn't. Sophia heard from someone that he was staying in a hotel. Natalie had left town to stay with family, and for the first time since meeting her, Daniel was alone with his own choices. Part of me wanted to call him. A mother does not stop being a mother just because her son hurts her. There were nights when I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at his name. I remembered him as a little boy with scraped knees, running into my arms because I was the safest place he knew. But I did not call. Not yet. Love without accountability had helped create this mess. I would not repeat that mistake. Instead, I went back to work, not as the woman trying to survive humiliation, as the woman rebuilding what had been damaged. My first step was meeting with every employee. One by one, they came into David's old office and told me what the last months had been like. Some spoke with anger, some with shame, some cried before they finished the first sentence. Manuel admitted he had almost resigned twice because Natalie mocked his designs in front of younger staff. Elisa, one of our designers, told me Daniel had presented her concept to a client as though it were his own. Leo showed me a long list of expenses he had kept hidden in case anyone ever asked the right questions. Every meeting hurt, but every truth helped clean the wound. I apologized to them, not because I had caused the damage, but because I had been slow to see how deep it went. Then we began repairing everything. I restored the original liability insurance. I brought back trusted suppliers who had been pushed aside. I removed the fake positions Natalie had created, but I gave those employees fair severance because they had been used too. I hired a new HR director with one clear instruction: no one in Solis architecture would ever again be punished for speaking the truth. The office changed slowly, not back to what it was before. Something better. We kept some modern updates, but only the ones that served the company. We rehung David's project photographs in the lobby, not as decoration, but as memory. Beside them, we added new photographs from recent projects completed by younger employees. Past and future, side by side. That was what Daniel and Natalie never understood. Progress does not require disrespect. Clients began calling. Mrs. Martinez was the first. I heard enough to know I should check on you, she said. I smiled for the first time that week. I'm still here. I know, she replied. That's why I'm staying. Others followed. Some had been confused by Natalie. Some had been worried. Most were relieved to hear my voice again. Slowly, trust returned. 3 weeks later, Daniel finally came to see me. He looked thinner, tired. His suit was wrinkled, and for the first time in years, he did not enter the building like he owned it. He stood in my doorway, eyes lowered. Mom! That one word almost broke me. I gestured toward the chair. He sat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I ruined everything. I looked at him carefully. You damaged a lot. Tears filled his eyes. I let her convince me you were holding me back. No, Daniel. You chose to believe that because it made taking control feel justified. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. I wanted to forgive him immediately. Every motherly instinct in me wanted to reach across the desk and hold his hand. But forgiveness is not the same as restoration. I forgive you as my son, I said softly. But trust will take time. And your authority in this company is not coming back until you become someone worthy of it. He cried then, quietly, like a man finally seeing himself clearly. When he left, I did not know what our relationship would become. But I knew the truth had finally entered the room, and truth is where healing begins. Months passed. Solis architecture grew stronger. The employees smiled again. Clients returned. New projects came in. The company felt alive, not because I controlled every corner, but because respect had returned to the foundation. One evening, I stayed late in David's office after everyone had gone home. The city lights glowed beyond the window. His photograph sat on the desk beside mine. I touched the frame gently. We protected it, I whispered. For the first time in a long time, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I had lost the illusion that love could excuse betrayal. But I had gained something stronger. The certainty that dignity, once reclaimed, becomes a kind of freedom. My son suspended me in front of the company I built. He thought that was the day I lost my place. But really, it was the day I finally remembered I had never needed anyone's permission to stand in it.